start the panel discussion until 12, and then 12 sharp, and then we should go for lunch, right? So, Mr. Kim Jung-tae from MIST will lead the discussion.
Okay, my name is Jung-tae Kim again. I'm working for Media Social Company. This is a social innovation consultancy and impact investor in Korea. I really love two stories from David, also Casey, but also on behalf of Casey from Kwan. And I just wish I have had you as my professor in my university. So funny and interesting so that my life might have been easier. And I love your story. Out of what you said, I had some my personal pickups. Like every day is a new venture. I think that's really the reality where we are in. So I just summarized what you said into some 3 steps. The first one is just first step, not knowing where to go. But once you take a step, then you get to know where to go. So taking the first step, I think that's really crucial. The second one is empathy. So go to the field and meet the people and have as many interactions as you could so that you can get some more ideas as to where to go, okay, right? And then lastly, that's about emerging strategy. So we don't actually start with concrete, perfect, complete action plans. But the strategies and ideas may emerge along the way. So I think this is the 3 steps. I just summarize the liberty of summarizing that way. And then the other pickups that I had is you change from the observer to an actor. So nothing is going to be changed if we just sit there and talking about social innovation. Nothing is going to be changed. But go there and then be an active actor. So how do you think?
I think you're doing very well. You get an A in my class.
So I wanted to have my professor. So thank you for that.
Good. I'd like you to be my student. You'd like me to be professor. We're all good.
Okay, fantastic. So I will share some more questions. But before I do that, I'll go to Kwan. So it was, I think, a perfect cast role. I think it is, as if we had Casey just with us here. So thank you for your really playing that role perfectly. And then my pickups there is actually so many things there. Social issues. That's traditionally the problems, right? That's how many people see that. And that's, I think, the business as usual, right? But Casey, I think he's so smart with his team together. He translated social problems into opportunities. And I actually spotted that he several times mentioned opportunities, right? And then he actually got that from the social issues that many people consider as. And then it comes down to how to translate social problems into opportunities. And then he actually brilliantly mentioned many keywords. The keywords that I really fascinated about, like system thinking, collective leadership, resilience, complexity, design thinking, human element. I think this is the classic dictionary of the social innovation, and I think it takes a year to learn all about this, but it's good that he mentioned these keywords, why this is important to navigate through the complexity and make things change it. So I think this is some of my personal pickups, and let me go to both of you with some questions, and then we'll invite you for your own questions to the speakers as well. So Dave, right?
Yeah, Dave.
Okay.
If you're my friend, it's Dave.
Okay. So thank you, Professor. So much of what you're saying reminded us of the quite similar issues that we're facing today. The so-called North Korean issues. So we have lots of North Korean refugees and defectors issues as well. So I was thinking of sitting there. I was thinking of how not the same model could be actually contributing to these issues that we face as well here. And suppose you launch a program in Asia, not for sale, but the Korean version for North Korean resettlers and defectors. And how would you start that? How would you replicate your model here for North Korean resettlers?
I would not know, sitting here today, what that would look like. I'm honest. That I would not know any better than, or I shouldn't say, I would know less than you what that would look like. But that would not then intimidate me. I think ignorance can be a beautiful place to be. And I'll say that again. We presume we need to know something in order to do something. It's rather our willingness to do something that leads us to a curiosity of knowledge and acquisition of the right model. So I would gather together people who have come out of North Korea and gathered with successful entrepreneurs who have already built businesses in Korea. And I'd get a range of people, and I'd have at least 2 days to brainstorm and hear those stories, what have been their experiences. So it's compressed research and development. Now, we have a model that we call design thinking, and it's very Silicon Valley. But the presumption is that there's probably 60 people here right now, and the presumption is that the collective knowledge of the 60 people here is more than any one of us. The trick is, how do we extract that aggregate knowledge? How do we extract it? So it would be, my goal would to bring together the refugee community or the exile community with the successful entrepreneur community and say, let's come up with, and I probably would break it down into groups that like compete against each other. So we all like to have a better idea than the next person. Compete, and then out of that, let's see what would be the best idea and why would it be the best idea. Now, that's a very simple version. Maybe you would do this then and test that model and come back. I'd bring Eddie Hong in and say, what have you learned in Vietnam and what have you learned in South Korea about being an entrepreneur? What have you learned in Panama? What have you learned from ISC? You would be 3 of my 50 I would look for. Yeah? So I guess for me, today I start with ignorance, but we could quickly change ignorance into workable knowledge.
So great. Ignorance can be an engine for the reasons why we need the other people, right? Yeah. And ignorance should not keep us from taking any actions, right? And I think that's a great lessons learned that he actually shared with all us on any issues, even though we don't have much knowledge on special issues, but that should not keep us from doing something, right? So thank you for sharing that. I think the same question to Juan. You already briefly mentioned that some models that works in some context may not effectively replicate it in other contexts. But I think so many issues like urban issues that we share together here in Seoul or in other rural areas as well. So what if your team, actually Casey, studied the Korean version of conservatory here, and what should be the modification? What should be the different elements of this business model should be here?
By the way, I love that business model. I think versions of that could work in many different contexts, so I love it. No?
Do we also got a So I think we started talking a little bit about how we could apply it in Korea. It's very, very different, and we need to figure out what the problem is. And I heard the issue of the elderly in these very poor areas. You have the problem of youth and unemployment. You have the problem of the rural exodus. I just heard in the break. There's a lot of people living farming, and there's a real threat to the Korean food supply in the future. So I think we need to figure out what the key problems are. I had one thought, and I'm not sure if this is Casey's model, but in terms of the overall idea of how do you resolve the issue of the elderly poverty as well as student unemployment. So one thought, and some of the best things happen when we're talking to people who are excited about this, is to develop some healthcare clusters in 달동네. When you have a very vibrant health economy, because the elderly, I have an elderly mother, so I know she needs a lot of things. She needs medical attention, she needs medicine, she needs potentially later assistant care. So you need a whole set of support services that's in this area. So how do we facilitate the creation of a health economy where a lot of it could also create a lot of jobs for especially the newly graduates. So that could be one thought. Along the same spirit, like Casey is doing, without really replicating everything he's doing. In terms of the cities, again, it's a very different context here. You have low workers that are not areas there's a lot of workers that working neighborhoods. But again, it's just in the same spirit. I think I need to understand that issue a lot more. In the broader idea of North Korea, and I'm jumping ahead with your question, but it's that I think a fun mechanism to develop cities doesn't have to be historical, but how to develop cities. It can be much more agile than having the governments involved. And if the future of North-South and the West relationship moves towards some opening that allows outsiders to come in, a fun mechanism to develop cities could be much more agile and easier than having the governments, even the World Bank come in. It's going to take some time. So,
thank you for the comments. I think the two teams, two enterprises share much in common. For example, you all emphasize the stakeholder management, and without stakeholders into the project in the stage of brainstorming, in the stage of ideation, nothing would be vitalized, right? So that you mentioned you need to have at least a 2-day workshop. But by the way, why 2 days at least?
Well, it's almost 1 day is to break down the paradigms or the way people see the world. Really interesting when I brought all these very talented entrepreneurs and investors or successful companies, and I said, help me solve the problem of the people of the Amazon. It's almost like if you've been to a grocery store and you get a cart where you put all of your food, and the wheel is broken, and the wheel keeps going the wrong way, and you got to keep pushing it, and it keeps going. That's what the first day is like. They keep wanting to go to a charity model because they're solving a social problem. And I'll go, okay, well, who's going to pay for that? They go, well, maybe some government or foundation. I go, how is that going to be entrepreneurial? No? To your point, if the government doesn't get in my way, I'm happy. Now, if they give me some funding, that's great. But I do not look to the government to create a solution. I think maybe in Korea you have more trust the government will do that than maybe in Silicon Valley. So I know I'm a product of my culture. But I operate all over the world, and unfortunately, the presumption it's the government's problem to solve social problems would be like saying it's the government's problem to create an innovative technology. Right? I think they can contribute, they can create good laws, okay. All to say, first day is to break down the paradigm, then you free them up the second day, they think, oh, you mean you really want me to think like a business person here? For some reason, I say, we all shut our brains down when it comes to social and environmental good. We start creating models that never find a way to pay for themselves or grow or scale. And we've got to break that model.
Okay. So my translation here again, the first day is a learning process, right? Because different stakeholders have different views on some issues. So we need to see how we perceive issues from our own perspectives, right?
Add a comment to that? He deserves an A+ now. But I said, so there's two ways. You can start from this end. You start from the social problem, and let me create a business that will solve that. All right. So Rebel honestly was that. Let's start a business that solves the problem of Amazon. Or you start with a great business model and say, how do we embed social or environmental good into the best business model we can come up with? I now lean towards the left. Not politically, I'm talking in terms of economic model. Yeah? Well, okay. All right. Economic model is, I would rather start with the best business idea and then bring in the social environmental good than to start with a social problem that I'm going to solve the problem for the homeless because I'm going to give them. If this feels like you end up with a social good company that's never going to make money and will not be viable. Does that make sense?
I think that absolutely makes sense to me. And even though we have to have the sensitivity to understand the social issues are, I think we need to have it's a skill, empathy is a skill, and be able to problem solve. But the actual solution must be not to compromise business discipline.
Yeah.
So in order to be the most sustainable solutions is to find the best CEOs out there who succeed no matter what field they go to. Well, not what field, but they can be very successful business person even if it's not impact, and have them become passionate. Is convert the already successful investors and business people. I think you have the model absolutely right, and I think the reason why Panama case has been so successful is because he is extremely professional, and he's always keep an eye on ensuring that this is generating return to the investors. It's not a charity, so I think that aspect cannot be underemphasized.
And you remember, going back to the first question my friend in the back row asked about resources, and you said something about stakeholders are so important. You'll notice that Casey, when we looked at who were his first investors, they were friends that he went surfing with or worked with, and family. So friends and family are usually going to be your first investors. And if they are not, then me as an investor, I'd say, well, what's wrong with you? Your friends and your family don't believe in you, why should I? Right? So I almost, if I'm going to invest in your company, I want to see who's investing before I get there. Because I don't know you. And so I would say, okay, one is important that their credibility is tied to yours. But the second thing is, I want them to invest because as an investor, if you fail me, you go, oh, I'm so tired of doing it, because it's hard. It's daily hard work to create a company. And one day you're going to wake up and say, I don't feel like doing this. Who cares about David Batstone and his money? Forget it. He can lose it, yeah? But grandma's money, on the other hand. You're not going to walk away, oh my God, grandma's going to be so distant, right? So I want to see grandma on your back, right, in order for me to invest.
So look for your friends and parents and families, right? And friends are so important. So my professor, you're my friends. Okay, going back to some questions again. Regarding conservatoria, I'd like to, do you happen to know some unsuccessful cases that Casey and his team tried very hard, but the outcome, the impact has not been that successful? Because unsuccessful means there are tons of lessons learned that we can get. So that's my point to you.
So the $50 million fund that Casey started, it wasn't his first business in Panama. The first business in Panama was to open a surf hotel in north of the beach area of Panama, and he spent $100,000 and 1 year, and it's too much work fixing toilets. It wasn't the glamorous life that he imagined to be, and so he quickly found out what he does not want to do, which is fixing toilets in the remote areas of Panama. So now he got sick. Out of this experience, he was recovering from the sickness in Panama City, in Casco Viejo, the old shell, where he had this inspiration. He befriended one of the most famous families in Panama, who happened to be a law firm, and that's how it started. So I think that's one experience that he learned from, and that's how he got these brilliant ideas. But he had to have the first failure first to find out what he really wanted to do. Well,
I know your founder at my SC, And I think it's a phenomenal example of saying, okay, I want to find a model that will work. How do I leverage the people I know and the things I know that work well and build on top of that? So, I said ignorance is wonderful, but having some assets that you can leverage is even better as you have ignorance. So understanding, well, who do I know, what do I know, and not trying to start from nothing, but say, I'm going to figure it out by bringing together, right? And so he did that very successfully. So I'd say MISC is a great example. Am I your friend now?
Yeah. So he knows my company's founder, so we are complicated.
Yeah.
In good way, by the way. Okay, so back to you. Regarding, okay, this might be the same, inquiry to you. What was your most frustrating experiences that actually might have stopped everything along the way? So could you tell us some stories and how actually you managed that so that actually you come where you are now?
Well, I suppose it is to be so confident of your idea that you're not willing to test it. There's a difference between a data and opinion. My opinion is my ideas are always brilliant. I don't know about you, but I think my ideas are always brilliant. Data sometimes proves me wrong. And this is why I think it's important to have a prototype before you do a prototype. Because, I made this mistake. I had a dream one night, it sounds crazy, and I woke up in the morning and thought, oh my God, that is a brilliant idea. Have you ever done that? And then later in the day you're thinking, well, maybe it wasn't so brilliant, but when I woke up I thought it was a great idea. And it was for a company. And basically, let's say, because we're now good friends, I live in San Francisco and you're in Korea, it's your birthday. If I could send you a text or an SMS, and inside embedded is a gift, and all you have to do is to go down and pick it up at the store in Seoul. So I find out your favorite food, or let's say it's Korean Tex-Mex. So a hybrid of Mexican food and Korean food. Right? There's some beautiful ones here, right? So I'm going to get you a big meal with margaritas. That's your birthday. It's going to be in the text. All you got to do is walk into the restaurant, scan it, free meal on me in San Francisco. I said, this is going to be great. People are going to love it. So I spent about $200,000 US building the prototype without testing it. I learned several things. People who give gifts love the service. They go, oh, that's awesome. I'm going to buy my friend a gift. People who receive the gift are either A, too lazy, B, too busy, or C, very forgetful. It doesn't matter which reason, but only 1 out of 4 people actually picked up the gift. So I love buying you a gift, but then I get frustrated because you don't redeem your gift. So the second time I go, oh, I'm not going to buy another gift. There's only a 25% chance. So it failed. I lost money. I was frustrated because I didn't do a prototype. I didn't test to see if it would work or not. So I guess my frustration is I always have to remind myself that my best idea may not be as good as I think it is.
So it's just between you and me, my birthday is 13 October. So it's good for you to prototype, okay, the service. I'm so expecting that, okay. I'm sorry.
We all know.
So invite you as well. Kwan? Casey mentioned, as I mentioned, several keywords like system thinking, complexity, design thinking, human elements, everything. But many of the young people, when they were in universities, they actually never learned about these keywords, methodologies, perspectives, and worldviews, whatever they are called. So, do you happen to know how Casey, he trained the new generation, his staff members, to get familiar with what they are and how they actually make use of that? Do you have any idea of that? Or your personal thought?
about what is doing to prepare the next generation?
How he train his new staff members so that they actually have this whole elements with that?
This is a great question. I think this is something that he's struggling. Actually, this is something that we spend the most time talking about as it expands the model and scaling. How do you get the right people to do this? And you need all kinds of different skills. You need a community leader. He calls it academic activists. People who are in the community and constantly interacting in the community, at the same time have the outside perspective and be able to frame things. They need people, impact managers and directors. So they need all kinds of skills, and it's very, very difficult to find. And one of the reasons why I have this conference is because we saw this gap in terms of what is taught in traditional MBA of other curriculums and what's really needed in the field. And we have some of the students here that we for this week. And prior to this, we had this 1 week intensive class about some of these topics. And some of the content of this course it includes change management and within the system thinking. But I try to incorporate. Before coming to IFC, I used to be a management consulting company, and I used to train consultants. And the same problem when we have training practitioners, we had to redo a curriculum. We had to give a separate curriculum even on basic communication skills, on basic thinking about strategy. So all the curriculum that you learn at these schools, it just did not do any good use to us. So we had to redo it, and I think this is partially the inspiration of this conference, is to figure out how to better prepare the next generation. I think we need to modularize. We need to identify what the key gaps are. I mean, I'm sure, I'd love to hear your thoughts about what the gap might be, but we need to identify what the gaps are and what's the best way to fill the gap.
So how do you go about it?
Well, I noticed that Casey said, I didn't get corrupted by business school. And I did mention that I have a PhD in theology, which is perfect preparation. So I don't want to suggest, Professor Sam, that you waste your time in a business classroom in Korea. But I do think that unless you see, and I really want to encourage those of you who are students. How many of you are active students today in the university? Okay, about a third of you. Is that to start thinking of your classroom as a place that you ask critical questions about what you're doing in everyday life. If you're thinking that life begins after you graduate, you already are behind. That you should start doing things now that prepare you for the future you want to design, and use your classroom as a way of preparing yourself, equipping yourself. No? And so I guess I find oftentimes business students are helpful with the tools, but they often are constricted or limited by, well, that will never work. Like Casey said very eloquently, that if I actually knew how crazy an idea this was, I never would have done it because I went to business school. So I guess it's tools are great, but we need new solutions. Government, business, and culture today are not creating a world that allows for the future we want to live in. So let's not keep going back to the same models all the time that we know don't work. But let's create new models based on real important tools that Professor Sam could teach you. But because they're going to create new models, let's reinvent the world, but by having very smart models.
Thank you for that. Now I'd like to invite you for your any burning questions before we actually close the panel sessions. Please raise your hand, identify yourself, and then, okay, please. How did you feel about, can you start with that?
I am Sam Song-Min-jeon, assistant professor at the Daejeon University, especially in business school. But I'm not add a comment that we need such a kind of a co-op program to deal with these issues. Somehow over the 100 years with the business schools in the States and also Korean business schools are heavily affected by the U.S. business schools. So most of professors are dealing with the academic achievement by writing our papers, that is not dealing with the practical issues much. So in that sense, somehow the early stage business model with the business school somehow changing into these kind of forms. But we gotta overcome these kind of issues by having whole programs. So I'm very proud to have programs with the Gachon to send the students in the San Francisco Bay Area to learn about the importance of the field, not having field failures, experimental, challenges they might have while they have a social enterprise program. So I'm very, very, very proud of that kind of challenges in Gachon.
Yeah, and I hope this is not being disseminated. I see there's a camera over here. But I sit in my university faculty meetings, and I look around and I say, my God, I would not hire one of these people. Seriously. And so how do we break that gap between, theoretical research and knowledge is so critical. I mean, I feel like every day I'm pushing my team to think, is that the best investment model? Is there a better one? How do we measure impact? Is there a better way? So I'm not disparaging academic or theory. What I'm disparaging is the gap between how that theory, what questions are asked, what pursuit is done, because it's based on your experience. Yeah? We can only ask what we see. I only read a novel with the eyes that I have. How do I think differently about what I'm reading? It's by having a different experience. Yeah? So I think that's, and Sam's a great, I'm not just because he's here, I don't need a grade from him. But he's a great example of someone who goes into the field, he meets entrepreneurs, he's embedding himself to learn the questions he'll bring to the classroom. And so I think, I would like him to be my professor.
And this is a bit of a self-selected group. I'm not sure if you guys can you see that how I appreciate a setting like this. Very difficult to happen. And we're at a university with a group of practitioners talking about all the things that can be better at a university. So it's a bit of we're sort of like insulting our host, but at the same time they're open to it, and it's very hard to find the academics who are comfortable in having an honest back and forth with practitioners. So I think I hope that we can all appreciate how rare this opportunity is. So thank you. And Hyun, do you want to say anything? I think you should say something.
I'm very comfortable with being criticized. I'm not a problem.
Okay. Any other questions?
If you don't like his shoes or his outfit, tell him later. He's comfortable.
Okay. So any other question from there, back there?
Hello, I'm Kian from government side. So I totally agree that the entrepreneurial approach and new business model and young people being engaged in these challenging global issues and pre-prototyping and doing something, and also approaching from a different perspective from the previous model, like foundations and government aid, and like one side giving all those models. I totally agree. And but on the other hand, I'm curious about your opinion and how you combine other resources from like international institutions or foundations or government, because there are still a lot of things and also assignments and also resources different from like venture capital, but also there is the aid and government grant, and also a lot of resources and things that should be done, different from business model. It can be, sometimes it can be like 100% successful business model, but from with the enough funding from government or enough funding from the foundation, it can be also sustained. So I'm thinking about like business is not like 100% all the time the answer, but sustainable solution, whether it can be like business or foundation model or government model. So sometimes like foundation or the government can be angel investment or just one cent giving, but it can still be important resources. So I'm wondering about your perspective on how you combine this, or totally deny the previous models, or you try to adopt totally new solutions. So I wonder about your opinion.
I'm 100% confident that my colleague has a better answer for you than I do.
Well, just because I know Keon and he's in terms of Quaker and what some of the issues that they're dealing with. I mean, there are a couple of things that governments and partners could be really helpful in a place like Conservatory and other models that I've seen. One is that for profit alone, because you focus on ecosystem, we're looking at the urban environment, you're looking at the ecosystem to improve the entire ecosystem. For the business to do well in the long run, the whole ecosystem is to improve, and sometimes that's beyond the profit and loss limitations of a company. So I think the traditional development foundation funding, there is a big role to play there. The other one, I think it takes a bit more soul searching in organizations like foundations and in government agencies like KOICA, is that feeling comfortable with investing and having vehicles that allow you to actually invest, be co-partners in investing, and having a return on it. So that's another, it's more of an institutional question for you, and getting back to you in terms of it's because there's huge opportunities, and this is part of my talk about the World Bank in the afternoon, is that the development world is shifting as we speak. The world is shifting from the traditional models of ODA to a one that is hugely driven by the new sources of capital, and a generational shift in family offices of millennials like you, who are completely moving towards this type of thinking. So I think the world is shifting, and I think the foundations and government agencies and multilateral institutions, we need to adapt to the world that is shifting.
I told you he'd have a better answer. Two very quick things. One is that, in my experience, say in Peru, that a collaboration with local government or regional government has been very successful. When we make a partnership, for every dollar we invest in infrastructure and development, you match us. That's a great model where you have a public-private partnership, and we're providing the economic engine for scalability and supply chain change. They're providing more resources towards that infrastructure that enhance our ability to do more for the community. So those are great partnerships. In terms of direct investment in enterprise and entrepreneurship, I guess I always say there's no such thing as free capital. It always has a cost. And Eddie is shaking his hand. It's always a cost. Who is your stakeholders investing in you? There are investors who are not B Corp type investors. I don't want them calling me every day about their return that's not aligned with my goals of my return. So private investors are not perfect. But the cost of capital of government or foundation, I find, is in the bureaucracy of the reporting and the bureaucracy of the management of that grant or that investment. And as an entrepreneur, I find it very difficult to deploy that capital. I almost have to hire new staff just to manage the grant or the investment. So I think as that evolution happens, it's for governments and foundations to understand that there needs to be a more elastic and flexible way for spending to happen that can be accountable, that can be reported, but it can't be so laborious that it makes the cost of capital more than the value it brings.
Any last burning questions? So I think with that, we're going to close this session.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Lee from Missions of Hope International. My question is regarding career advice to the young professionals. A lot of advice that people hear about social impact factor is people usually say that you need to develop your professional career from the non-social factor first. Because people a lot of say if you're working on big bank or consultant companies or professional firms which is not in social sector, you can always apply your skills into the social sector. Especially in Korea, social sector is a little considered as a minor factor, but a lot of people, parents, are saying that if you start your career at the social sector, your career would not be easy to be applied to the non-social sector. So what kind of advice can you give it to the young professionals who are hesitating to enter into start their career in the social sector because of these reasons?
Well, I suppose as someone who has been a theologian, a journalist, a venture capitalist, social development, I guess all of those, they're one thing that they have, they're my story. And I think that there's no one story. I guess I'd say that you all are, because I work in the area of human trafficking, I'm very conscious of people's freedom to write their own story. You're writing an incredible novel and it's called Your Life. There's two things about that. One is, you do not get to write the first 11 chapters. Right? Someone wrote them for you. And I'd say that for a lot of individuals, their great emotional, psychological challenge in life is to embrace the fact that you cannot change those 11 chapters. You didn't like your parents. You didn't like where you grew up. You didn't like the things that happened to you. It sucks. It's your story. The beauty is you get to start writing at chapter 12. Right? You have the freedom now to create your story. So whatever your background has been, whatever your, use that to start writing your story and start moving it in the direction you want it to go. And so what you studied, where you've been, start from there. Your family, your friends, start from there. And start taking the steps of your story to where you want it to go. So there is no perfect background. I, though, would, as someone who works now more in the area of social enterprise and spending some time in the Korean community, I think the danger here is there's so much community government, kind of what I call soft support, that it doesn't create this risk capitalism, risk adventure, right? So that you're not pushed to, like I said, my son, you're on your own now. Well, that's too scary. I want to find someone who will give me a hub that I can, get government funding for. And so I think the risk, I would push yourself to be a business entrepreneur first, and then think about how I'm going to engage the kind of impact that I want to see in the world.
Now you have the better answer, not the two. Great answer. Hard to top that. I think I will add to what Dave said is that I think one way to practically take risks in a more comfortable environment, given my background, I would encourage you guys to go overseas and try in terms of risk taking. There you can take risk taking here, which I think will be wonderful, but also it's a big world out there and there are lots of needs out there. And you might be a bit more free from the culturally restrictions you find here, and especially if you're with a group of people, organization that will appreciate you. So I think that might be, it's both risk-taking, but also you're more free to do the risk-taking. So that's one thing I would encourage you. I don't think, as just like Dave said, there's one path. My path is different than you guys. I started my career as a computer programmer. As out of college, just took whatever job to pay my bills. And then went to grad school. There was a allowed me to shift my career. I started at the World Bank. My first year at the World Bank was really, I think I had to build my narrative as I went on. I didn't have anything planned. It's just one by one, day by day.
And just a commercial, I can't help myself. that if you want to go somewhere in the world and be an entrepreneur in a social impact environment for 3 to 6 months, talk to Don, raise your hand Don, Dr. Batstone, otherwise known as my crazy brother. And we are setting up internships over the world. So you can work in Bulgaria. There's an incredible technology company working with food distribution. They need some help in data analytics. If you know data, then we would send you there for 6 months. Ecuador, a chocolate company that needs help in supply chain, we'd send you to Ecuador for that period of time. So you get work in the field doing something in another environment, and you get to learn a lot about yourself, you get to learn a lot of business, and it's great for your resume. When I'm reading a resume to hire, I said, what have you done? If someone said they worked 6 months in supply chain in Ecuador, I'm very impressed. I went to school, and I drank a lot at the pub, not so impressed. So having that background, I think, is valuable for your career, both in terms of your skill set, your confidence, but also your resume.
I think it's, my background was as a venture capitalist, but I'm really interested in other area, but venture capital is one of the channel and go through to somewhere around. And someone asked me, why do you want to make money? It's just I want to get bigger. Yeah, not because of myself, but I want to help some other people. Yeah, without money, I cannot go travel around the world, and even I cannot help other people. Yeah, so I think it's all the role is different. Yeah, whether it is like the social or this is a non-profit or for-profit, it doesn't matter. I think it's just your goal is to help other people. That's the same goal.
So thank both of you for sharing your insight and wisdoms and some failures, success stories as well. I think this just business, not for sale, and conservatorial. I think these are just two of the many other tons of examples of how business can be a force for good. So your sharings here today, I think, will have a lasting impact to the future generations here. So let's close this session with giving them your big hands, please. Thank you.
And a big hand for our very humble and dry-humored moderator.